Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're a senior leader today, you're probably facing this huge paradox in business. Strategy overload.
Hmm.
You're definitely not short on vision, right? But you might feel like you're drowning in decks. Every year, big investments in the future, digital, AI, growth platforms.
Yep, the big bets.
Exactly. But then, maybe 6 months down the line, you look at the numbers, and there's this massive gap, this frustrating canyon between the ambition on the whiteboard and what's actually hitting the bottom line.
That canyon, yeah, that's what we call the execution gap. And our mission today really is to unpack how the best companies are actually closing it. Avoiding what often just feels like, well, strategy theater.
Strategy theater, I like that.
It captures it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're looking at an innovative model, one designed specifically to turn strategy from a static document into something living, breathing.
Yeah.
A system of action, and often using these specialized units called strategy and motion pods.
Okay, let's dive right into that because this frustration, I think it's pretty universal. The core problem, it seems, isn't a lack of good ideas.
No, rarely.
It's more like a critical shortage of the actual mechanics needed to follow through. Strategy just stalls.
Yeah.
Not because the vision's bad, but because the structure meant to deliver it is maybe fragmented.
Fragmented is the perfect word.
Right. Think about the typical annual strategy drill. You have these intense offsites, the goals are bold, the slides look amazing, almost museum quality sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Polished.
Super polished. But then fast forward a few months, how many of those big goals have really, truly taken root across the whole organization?
Often. Not as many as planned.
Exactly. The business reality often feels, well, pretty much the same. So the dissatisfaction, it seems, isn't really with the ideas themselves. It's about how those ideas are supposed to filter down and actually, turn into action.
And what's fascinating and maybe a bit alarming is that the cost of this fragmentation, it's quantifiable and it's massive. A lack of strategic clarity isn't just some governance issue. It's genuinely an expensive talent drain. When your people don't really know where the company's heading or how their work truly connects, well, they start looking elsewhere.
Right.
We actually see data linking this kind of strategic ambiguity directly to higher employee attrition rates.
Wow. So that's a huge hitting cost right there. You're not just losing strategic momentum, you're actually losing your key people because things are unclear internally.
Precisely. And then layer on top of that the hard dollars just wasted on misalignment.
The project costs.
Yeah. When different projects, different teams are pulling in slightly different directions, maybe based on slightly different interpretations of the strategy, the cost just multiplies. There's data from the Project Management Institute suggesting that, upwards of 12 cents of every single dollar spent on projects can be wasted, just gone, because those projects aren't fundamentally aligned with the core strategy.
12 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
That's substantial, especially when the CEO is ultimately accountable for that value oversight. That level of waste is just not sustainable.
It's absolutely not.
And this leads straight into that noise problem you mentioned. The thing executives face every Monday morning.
An incoming barrage, yeah.
You walk in, and the CEO might get multiple, often competing versions of the plan. One spreadsheet from corporate strategy, maybe a different priority list from finance.
And then maybe 3 more conflicting roadmaps from different business units.
Right. And individually, maybe each of those plans has some merit, some logic behind it.
Yeah.
But taken together, it just creates this systemic noise, internal friction. It makes getting a single clear picture of what's going on almost impossible.
That chaos, that noise and friction, is exactly what these strategy and motion pods are designed to cut through. They represent a different kind of operating structure, one built to replace that noise with clarity, to replace bureaucracy with real embedded alignment, and maybe most importantly, to replace that theater with actual measurable traction.
Okay.
Think of them almost like modular, highly accountable special forces teams, but focus purely on moving the strategy forward.
Okay, I hear strategy teams, and my first thought is, honestly, oh, great, more meetings, more steering committees.
Yeah.
How is this different? How does it avoid just adding another layer that slows everything down?
That's a totally fair question, and it really hits the key differentiator. These pods operate under a principle we call single path execution.
Single path execution.
This is the core mechanism.
Yeah.
It's what cuts through the noise you described.
So what does that mean practically, like for the CEO on a day-to-day basis?
It means that every single initiative, doesn't matter if it's a finance transformation or a tech platform, every initiative has to tie back to the exact same centrally agreed mandate. And, critically, it has to feed into the same real-time telemetry.
Ah, the data aspect.
Yes. It's like switching from, everyone reporting progress on their own little spreadsheet dashboard to everyone feeding data into one single shared satellite view of the battlefield.
Okay, I see.
So the CEO goes from juggling multiple competing versions of the truth to just having one. This single view clearly shows what's moving, what's maybe stuck, and crucially, where those inevitable resource trade-offs need to happen to keep the strategy on track.
That definitely clarifies the reporting side. But alignment, that's always tricky, right? It's inherently political, organizational. How do you get genuine buy-in from, say, entrenched business unit leaders without spending months in workshops and endless negotiation?
Right, the political friction. The pods are actually structured to kind of circumvent that.
How so?
Well, their design blends centrally aligned resources. So that's the strategic oversight, the central data experts, the financial rigor people. It blends those with embedded, on-the-ground expertise from the business units they impact.
Ah, so they have people from the business in the pod.
Exactly. They bring local credibility and central authority together. And crucially, the structure is set up so decisions get made once within that pod context, and then they're carried forward as a unified plan.
So the CEO doesn't have to keep stepping in to referee the same arguments.
Precisely. It eliminates that constant need for the CEO to play tiebreaker between different functional leaders fighting over resources or direction. Alignment is basically engineered into the execution team itself.
That's really interesting. It sounds less like just managing projects and more like fundamentally re-architecting how the company operates around its strategy.
It definitely leans that way. It's about the operating model.
And speaking of that bigger picture, that architecture, we should probably touch on the underlying system that connects the strategy piece with the capital piece.
Absolutely. Yeah, when we talk about this unified approach, we're really talking about an entire operating model, one that fuses strategy, capital, and execution together seamlessly.
Okay.
The overall architecture, the big picture, is what we call the ecosystem orchestrator mesh. That's the sort of integrated system you're building towards.
Right. The what?
The what, exactly. Then the how you actually execute within that mesh, that's through these strategy and motion pods we've been discussing.
Got it. The how.
And then the fuel, what makes sure every action has the right resources behind it, the money and the people, that's the capital stack mesh.
Yeah.
The whole goal is to create essentially one motion, no friction.
Okay. One motion, no friction. Let's focus on that fuel part for a second, the capital stack mesh, because resource allocation, getting the money and the right talent to the right places, that's where so many brilliant strategies seem to just crash and burn, right?
It's the classic failure point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Resource allocation often becomes, political.
Yeah.
Or it's reactive, or it just feels totally disconnected from the strategy that was agreed 6 months ago. It's like the architects draw up these amazing plans,
Yeah.
but the actual building materials, the capital, the funding are controlled by someone else who maybe never really got the memo or fully bought into the blueprints.
That is the perfect analogy. And the pods, integrated with this capital stack mesh idea, they solve this by bringing intense rigor right from the start. They don't just draft the strategy. They actively choreograph the capital and the talent decisions alongside it from day one.
Okay.
So a pod isn't just strategy, folks. It includes integrated financial expertise. This means every single strategic bet, every initiative is immediately quantified. It's prioritized based on expected value. And critically, it's tracked for its actual financial impact in near real time.
So it directly tackles that old problem of, strategy divorced from the numbers.
Exactly that. It fixes that fundamental, decades-old disconnect. So for the CEO, this means no more watching money just flow into legacy areas or pet projects that don't directly push the core strategy forward.
Yeah.
And it means you can quickly and defensively disinvest from bets that just aren't performing.
And that ability to shift, that speed, that's got to be critical too, right? Because traditional strategy often feels like it's instantly obsolete the minute the annual plan is locked in the boardroom binder.
Oh, completely. The lock-in problem.
Yeah. If there's a major regulatory change or suddenly a competitor launches some disruptive product out of nowhere, if you can't pivot fast, you've basically lost months, maybe quarters of ground.
And that's precisely where the modularity, the design agility of the pods really proves its worth.
Okay.
Unlike, say, large, slow-moving internal committees or traditional PMOs, these pods are designed to be temporary in many cases, highly focused, nimble.
So you can spin them up and down.
Exactly. They can be spun up, they could be reconfigured with different expertise, or they could be wound down rapidly in response to those real-time market shocks you mentioned. So If that major competitor launches something unexpected, a designated pod can mobilize, figure out the necessary pivot, and reprioritize initiatives literally within weeks, not waiting for the next quarterly review or the annual planning cycle to restart. It delivers enterprise agility right at the point of action.
I think we've all seen the alternative to that, where maybe expensive teams deliver these massive, glossy reports, beautiful documents.
The 100-slide deck.
Yeah, and they become what you might call digital shelfware. They just sit there, never really translating into actual change on the ground. That's the kind of consulting theater that I think CEOs are really actively trying to avoid these days.
Precisely. And they should. The demand from the C-suite, rightly so, is for any team, internal or external, to add visible, quantifiable value, not just produce more documents.
So how do these pods ensure they're not just doing that?
The critical difference is how they're positioned and what they're accountable for. Strategy and motion pods are explicitly positioned as operators.
Operators, not just advisors.
Exactly. They work inside the business machinery. And they're held uniquely accountable for both the design of the solution or initiative and its delivery, the end-to-end outcome.
Okay.
So they deliver progress metrics, they deliver early wins, things measured in that real-time telemetry we talked about, not just, a massive slide deck destined for a shared drive folder somewhere. They are accountable for the actual P&L impact.
That accountability, tying it to the P&L, that feels like the absolute key. So let's ground this whole thing in some tangible results, like operator-grade metrics. What kind of measurable outcomes have organizations actually seen in the field when they deploy this kind of unified model?
Yeah, great question. Because the proof really is in the outcomes, specifically the speed and the financial rigor achieved. And we do see consistently high-impact metrics.
Like what?
Well, for instance, a major global industrial manufacturer, they experienced a 37% faster initiative cycle time.
37% faster.
Yes, in just 2 quarters. Just think about what accelerating your value realization by over a third actually means competitively.
That's nearly cutting execution time in half for key initiatives. That kind of shift in pace, it fundamentally changes your competitive position, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And then when you connect the strategy execution directly to that capital stack mesh concept, the financial discipline just dramatically improves.
Okay.
We saw another large enterprise. They identified and reallocated $85 million away from lower performing bets towards their absolute top decile opportunities.
85 million.
Yeah. And with live value tracking in place. Why? Because the execution system finally gave them transparent, reliable data on what was actually working and what wasn't.
Well, that shows the system is kind of self-correcting. It helps you find the gold standard investments and then quickly starve the underperformers of resources.
That's exactly the idea, self-correcting based on real data. And we also have the example of a multinational Fortune 500 bank. Really impressive governance and financial results in just 2 quarters.
Okay, what did they see?
They reported 7 out of 9 key strategic initiatives hit their predefined ROI gate on schedule. They achieved a plus 310 basis point blended increase in return on invested capital, their ROIC.
Wow, 310 basis points.
Significant lift.
Yeah.
And they redirected $102 million to their highest priority, highest returning bets. So the common thread in all these results, it's faster cycle times, much cleaner economics, and measurable, demonstrable growth that you can tie directly back to the original strategic intent.
It certainly sounds like this unified approach, bringing strategy, capital, and execution together like this, is particularly powerful for organizations where things like governance, regulatory pressures, and just sheer scale are really critical factors.
Yes, absolutely. This model seems particularly well tailored for those kinds of regulated and scale-minded enterprises. We definitely see the strongest adoption and, frankly, the biggest benefits in financial institutions. Banks, payments companies, wealth platforms.
Makes sense.
Large healthcare enterprises, too. And also growth scale tech and industrials. Basically, any large, complex enterprise that suffers most acutely when that internal fragmentation and noise takes hold.
Right. Those are the ones where the cost of misalignment really bites hard.
Exactly. Ultimately, you have to step back and think about the CEO's role today. It's no longer effective, maybe it never was, for them to simply referee every single internal conflict or personally arbitrate all the budget fights or get dragged into managing project details.
Yeah, that's not scalable.
Not at all. The modern executive's real job, their leverage point, is ensuring that the system of strategy, the whole operating model, works consistently, transparently, and with complete accountability baked right into its design. The strategy in motion model, within that broader mesh framework, provides that robust operating system.
So the fundamental shift here for the whole organization really is moving away from putting the primary focus on just generating the next round of beautiful slides and reports,
Mm.
and instead implementing a single unified path, a single source of truth almost, one that guarantees strategic value actually gets delivered faster and with, as you said, zero internal friction, or at least much less friction.
Much less friction, absolutely. Which
Yeah.
really leaves you, the listener, with maybe a few critical questions. The kinds of questions this new operating model forces you to ask about your own organization's readiness for real execution. Just for reflection, ask yourself these things. First, do our capital flows and our talent assignments, do they truly reflect our stated strategic priorities consistently? Or are legacy projects, maybe political inertia, still sucking up valuable resources?
Good question.
Second, can we actually pivot quickly when the world inevitably shifts? Do we measure our strategic agility in weeks, or is it still measured in annual planning cycles?
The agility test.
And fundamentally, do we operate with one commonly understood version of the truth across the enterprise? Or are we constantly juggling many different, often competing versions coming from different departments and systems?
One truth or many truths? Yeah.
If the answer to any of those questions feels messy or muddled or just unclear, well, that's probably a strong sign that the execution gap in your organization is likely far wider and far more expensive than you might realize.
But the good news is you don't have to just accept that gap as the status quo. This deep dive shows there are concrete, proven ways to really re-architect how strategy actually comes to life.
There absolutely are.
Well, thank you for joining us for this essential deep dive into closing that gap between strategy and execution, finding clarity in the noise. We really appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.